Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing okay today. I've had a bunch of administrative stuff to do. Not necessarily the most fun thing in the world. But George Galloway, Gorgeous George, is going to be on the show. I hit him up. He responded within the course of less like an hour and says, yes, I'd be glad to keep. He said, sure, brother, I'll be on your show. It's like, oh, that's awesome. It's like the implicit racism of a foreigner. I love it. I'm joking about that. George is going to be, he says, send him an email, so I'm going to send him an email to be on the show. You have no idea how much I love George Galloway. I have sit here and binge watched George Galloway for hours on end, being entertained to like nobody's business. And again, one of those people who's helped shape my workable point of view of the world. The man is amazing. He argues better than pretty much. His capacity to argue is better than I think almost anybody that I've come across. He's just good. Like his historical knowledge of that stuff combines to be damning. It's possible that the people he's arguing against are not all that bright, but even people when he's actually, against competition. He's a salesman, he's a politician, he's immensely knowledgeable of historical and world events. The man is awesome. And so I am proud and privileged for him to come on to the show. The thing I want to talk about today is Khanna. Khanna. I've done 2 videos on this. Some people thought I was right, some people thought I was wrong. I like Khanna, and because I like Khanna, it feels weird when you put a knife in somebody that you actually like. But my feeling is, in this post, I will be that hatchet man. And if I'm being honest, I was somewhat pissed off that a Justice Democrat didn't support another Justice Democrat. And in this case, it had nothing to do with the person being a JD. It had everything to do with who she was and her policies. I thought her policy was awesome. And I like her. So, I think there should be a consequence for bad behavior. And then that's the way I look at it. Now, that being said, Khanna has somewhat responded to this. Apparently, I wasn't the only one flipping out about this. Apparently, there were a lot of people who were flipping out like, what the fuck? How are you supporting? What? How? He responded to this. He's come up and he went on Jimmy Dore, and it's an interesting conversation. I'm going to play part of the conversation because there are 2 main parts that I want to talk about. Look, I don't doubt his bona fides, meaning policy stuff. He's on point. I mean, if you're talking about, like from the standpoint of a lefty that you would get in the Democratic Party, he's to the left. People's issue had more to do with who he was supporting in this. That being said, he came out and did a dual endorsement. I'm not going to repeat it because Jimmy Dore is going to repeat this in the beginning. But let's take a look at part of this video and let's hear his explanation. Me flipping out, calling him a rat bastard and a traitor in our midst, at the very least deserves that he gets to say so in this. So let's hear him give his retort and explanation to people losing their shit about the dual endorsement. And by the way, within a day, he came out in order to dual endorse. He said he dual endorsed because he couldn't necessarily unendorse. He said he's not allowed to unendorse. But he's a person. Like, I love his response. His response is, I think what my response would be is like, I was shocked as shit at the hate that I got. And I will know in the future to do X or to do Y. I loved it. Well, let's take a look at Khanna's answer to this, and then let's talk about it after. I think I may let this run for a minute or 2 because I want him to get his point out, and I want Dore to explain the surroundings of this.
So in New York City, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a progressive upstart running against Joe Crowley, who's been a centrist and who doesn't even live in the district and doesn't really represent the people. So here's an interesting story. Justice Democrats, which is a party invented to primary corporate Democrats, Khanna is one of the most prominent members of the Justice Democrats. He's the congressman from Silicon Valley here in California. Ro Khanna doesn't take corporate money, and he's very progressive, and he's anti-war and all that stuff, all the good things you want. Medicare for all, free college. He endorsed Joe Crowley, which everyone considered to be the corporate Democrat and the one who's in the leadership position. They say he's next to take over for Nancy Pelosi, or he's positioning himself for that. So Roe endorsed Joe Crowley, and everyone went, "Wait a minute! You're supposed to be a Justice Democrat, and you're a progressive. Why would you endorse that guy?" So he then took a lot of heat on Twitter and social media for a whole day. And after that day, he came out and said this. He said, "I have listened today to hundreds of progressives from around the nation who have been inspired by Ocasio-28 campaign. I am equally inspired and dual endorsing her. I explain why I support Joe, but I want to affirm Ocasio-Cortez's bold progressive positions. As a son of immigrants, I feel strongly we need more millennials, women of color, disenfranchised communities entering the political process. She is a trailblazer. Competition is good, and the voters of the New York 14th District will only benefit from the spirited elections." That's Ro Khanna. So that's what he said. We're going to have him explain his decision and a lot more right now. Ro Khanna, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. We're talking with friend of the show, Congressman Ro Khanna. He represents California's 17th District, and he recently made the decision to co-endorse both Joe Crowley and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over in New York's 14th District race for Congress. Ocasio-Cortez is the progressive challenger to Crowley, the establishment Democrat. Ro's here today to try to explain why he decided to co-endorse both of them. So, Ro, go ahead and tell us what happened. You first endorsed Joe Crowley, and tell us why you endorsed Joe.
Well, so I'm I'm a freshman member of Congress. Joe's our conference chair in the House, and I had done a bill with Barbara Lee on legalizing marijuana, and Joe ended up supporting that bill and getting folks on board with it. And, he got on Medicare for All and got on as an original sponsor to the Workplace Democracy Act, which would allow and make it easier for unions to organize. So he asked me for my support, and I said, okay, here's someone who's, in my term in Congress, moved to the left, supported my legislation, and offered it. Now, the mistake I made in candor was that I really didn't follow Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign. And she's run a phenomenal race. She's gotten most of the progressive groups and activists behind her. She's clearly the more progressive candidate. She had pointed out that, she's for a federal jobs guarantee. She's not taking any corporate PAC money. And so, I remember what it was like running against an incumbent. And I said, I want to be supportive of her. And the best thing I thought I could do in the circumstance was to endorse her as well, which made me the only member of Congress or senator in the entire body who has supported her campaign, or frankly, as she puts it, acknowledged her campaign. She's pleased with it, and a lot of folks have been pleased with it, but fairly, I've been criticized by a number of folks saying, well, why are you dual endorsing, and why don't you rescind your endorsement of Crowley, and why don't you just endorse her? But I feel comfortable with my decision and think it's in a good place.
So you were one of the, I think maybe the first member of the Justice Democrats.
I actually believe this. This makes somewhat sense to me. I had no expectation of the person who was running against him to even put up a real contest, because many of the people who they were putting up are fly-by-nights. And so I just, I supported Crowley. I wasn't paying attention. I can kind of believe that. I can even believe, I suspect more so it's the first part. Him and I worked together, and he worked with me on a piece of legislation. He helped me with my legislation. I was appreciative that he helped me with my legislation. He was a person that was in the room, and so I supported him, not paying attention to the politics that are taking place at the other end of the continent. Or the other end of the country. Maybe, yes. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Let's keep going. There's another part to this, though. But this kind of gives you this thing of the politics of who's in the room matters. It matters a great deal. Also, the dual endorsement. Let's talk about that for the moment. If look, the thing for this is not so much that I demand perfection. I don't think perfection exists. What I do like about this, and what it makes you think of, do you remember when what is his name? Klobuchar, the guy with no neck. When he comes out and says, "I told Nancy Pelosi to shut up about billionaire," and his jowls shake as he says it. And I called Chuck Schumer. I called Nancy Pelosi. And I said I'd essentially shut their money off. I'd stop bribing them if they say stuff that I don't necessarily like. He called them personally. Think about that. This plutocrat is calling Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer saying, "I will no longer give you money if you say this." Who is he coming to? He's essentially coming to the left. He's coming to the left. Like, so in the same way that guy went to Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Khanna is coming to this particular part of the political spectrum because I suspect he considers this part as being his political base. I'm fascinated by that. And maybe it's nothing to be fascinated by. Ultimately, the people who you have in your circle and in the room are the ones that you're listening to. They make up your base. But it does give you this idea on who the base of the Democratic Party is representing. It does give you that. It also gives you this idea of responsiveness when somebody is actually paying attention to you. That's different. I kind of want to be an asshole here, if I'm being honest. There's this awesome quote. Well, it's not a quote. It's a paraphrase by James Baldwin. James Baldwin was having a debate with, I think it was a 4-way debate. This guy wrote a book on Nat Turner. And James Baldwin was somewhat apoplectic after reading that book on Nat Turner, making this point that he wanted to protect the legacy of Nat Turner. And the guy who wrote the book had no ill malice, had nothing whatsoever. And when you hear the guy explain his point and explain his case and his point of view, he was being earnest. Now, James Baldwin kind of makes this point. If I over-exaggerated based on the factors to which I've been exposed, my bad. Essentially saying, I grew up in a particular culture, in a particular society, with a particular perspective, influenced by the society itself. I didn't get this way just by getting this way. I got this way because of the factors around me that kind of pushed me to being this way. If I am overly sensitive because of it, fair enough. I kind of feel that way about this. I mean, ultimately, the perspective that people took when they flipped out because of this particular endorsement was based upon the behavior of the party itself, with a lot of people feeling that they had been let down over and over and over again, with Democrats saying sweet things in their ears, tickling them on their ass, and then punching them in the eye and stealing their wallet. This is the behavior to which we're accustomed. So you can imagine people being somewhat sensitive about what they consider to be outright and utter treason. Let's keep going. This is almost done.
So you're a part of that organization, the Justice Democrats, formed by Kyle Kalinske and Cenk Uygur.
Yeah.
And so that group or that organization was formed specifically to primary corporate Democrats. And so you can see why it leaves a lot of people scratching their head when you endorse someone who's a corporate Democrat perceived to be over a very progressive candidate. So that's why it's and also in Dianne Feinstein's race, you didn't endorse the Justice Democrat in that race either. You endorsed Kevin De Leon. So that seems kind of. Can you explain that? Like if you're a part of an organization?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
So when I joined Justice Democrats, and if you talk to Kyle or Shaita or Corbin, I said explicitly, I'm happy to stick to all of the platform, but there's no way that I can endorse every candidate that you're running on the slate. I mean, you're running 50, 60 candidates. I will endorse individually, but I'm not going to commit to endorsing the slate. And in fact, I talked to Cenk and Shoikat and Corbin, explicitly about that. Now I've endorsed probably 16 Justice Democrats, and a lot of them across the country, more than any person in Congress by far. But there have been a few races where I haven't endorsed the Justice Democrats. One of them was in Feinstein's race. Now I was the only California Democrat, I think, and maybe Jimmy Gomez also, who endorsed against Feinstein. So it was a bold enough move to go against Feinstein. But at the time, I thought, Kevin would have a better chance of making it through the top two. And I didn't want a Republican making it through the top two and Dianne Feinstein not having any competition. And so that was my logic behind supporting Kevin. I, like Allison Hartson, I think she's done a great thing. I've said nice things about her, but I was explicit that even with her, that I, thought Kevin would be able to give a more formidable challenge, and is not as progressive as I am on some issues, but he's certainly far more progressive than Dianne. In most of the other cases, in many cases, I stayed out of it. About 16 cases, I've supported the Justice Democrat. In Crowley's case, it was literally that we had worked on the legislation together, that, he had been working with the Progressive Caucus. But I do see, given how inspiring Ocasio's campaign is, in retrospect, I wish I had just stayed out of it. I think it's turned out well, and that my endorsement for her has created probably more attention and momentum, and she's been very, very gracious about it.
So, yeah, ironically, this actually has gotten more attention to her race, so it probably has helped her. An unintended consequence that actually I think has shined more light on the race and gotten her more press, and more people are aware of her because of it. So, and she has thanked you. So, and she has, as
I'm going to let you get, well, it's not a secret, but there are certain things that I didn't know before I did this. Like before doing the channel, there were certain things, there were certain behaviors, there were certain incentives that I didn't fully grasp and fully understand they were part of a process. In the political process, what you see is, look, regardless of what Khanna's political ideologies are, ultimately he has to work with a bunch of other people. You can imagine if you have to sit and work with a bunch of other people. Imagine you were at school, and imagine being at school, you had a body that you had to work with, let's say a few days, and within that body you guys made rules, let's say school council, and you had to go back and interact with the other kids and everything else, but at the end of the day you had to go back to that body and do certain things. You can imagine that you're going to get socialized to the body of people that you're working around, and it will be a horrible, horrible work environment if you're actively supporting each and every person getting taken out. That's almost an incentive that's just built into it, this kind of insular type thing for incentives. Also, from the standpoint of doing media, I couldn't tell whether or not he was... I think this is rehabilitation. The goal of this is to rehabilitate Khanna and to minimize the damage from people who are going after him. And for whatever Jimmy wants to say about pulling out the Democratic Party, I think what he would say is you vote for the person who represents your interests. And I think this is one of those things where he accepts that Khanna is somebody who would represent his interests, in which case it is perfectly okay to try to rehabilitate Khanna. I guess that's what this is. The way the questions are being asked, the way the questions are being phrased, is giving a person a time to explain, as opposed to certain interviews where the person is critical and goes after the person in order to make them look bad. It's the way that you go about your interview. Do you want to rehabilitate? Do you want to make look bad and extract information? Just saying. This sounds like more like rehabilitation. But again, I don't dislike Khanna, and I like the fact that he was responsive. So if I had the interview, I might have did it. Yeah, I might have did it the same way. Now, the reason why I'm stopping this here, Jimmy Dore starts to get critical at this point. Meaning the question or the interview goes from a kind of, I am trying to rehabilitate you, to I am trying to show you the folly of your ways by being a Democrat. It's a fascinating interview. It's a tonal change in the way that the interview goes. I am trying to rehabilitate your image. All right, now let's get to the real shit about why are you a Democrat? Stuff like that. Let's keep going. I don't know how much longer I'm going to play this, but there's a very specific point I want to get to. I thought we would have gotten to it by now, but let's keep going.
encouraged people who support her to, as G said, get your back. So,
But I want to be clear that I'm not trying to be a politician. It was a mistake. I mean, the correct thing to do is what Bernie does in a lot of these races. He just stays out of it. I mean, you can't. He's bold in principles. He's also in politics, and he understands. He's got to work with colleagues. You can't go endorsing against every one of your colleagues, or you're never going to get any legislation. But you certainly don't have to go affirmatively endorse people you don't agree with. And it was a mistake. I'm not perfect. I should have probably stayed out of it. And that's going to be my view in the future. If there is a progressive alternative, I'm just going to either endorse the more progressive alternative or stay out of it.
I got to be honest. I know this sounds weird. It doesn't sound weird. I guess not weird or otherwise. I actually like that. And I hear that and I say, it sounds like a person. It sounds like a person. And I say sounds like a person. It's not. Of course, you give the political statement, but in explaining it, he's explaining it, I think, in a way that I would explain it. Like, look, I kind of just fucked up. My bad. In the future, I wouldn't necessarily step on this buzzsaw. I gave this guy an endorsement, just giving him somewhat perfunctory, and I got hit with a crowbar. I'm not going to give these endorsements willy-nilly anymore. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like a person. I like it. Let's keep going.
I think what rubbed people the wrong way was, why are you endorsing someone who's not progressive when there's no need to? Like you said, I think it worked out, and I think even Alexandria will tell you that it's worked out in her benefit. But for me, it was a learning experience, and when I make a mistake, I'll admit I was wrong.
Now, you previously said that you are to the right of Bernie Sanders. What positions, what policies are you to the right of him on?
Right here. All right. I may have to split this video just because this video is getting long, but this question is fascinating, and this is so it's an odd question. But it's a good question. You say you're to the right of Bernie Sanders. Great. You're creating a demarcation point. You are creating a demarcation point in the ground from the standpoint of what it means to be left and right. On the left. Fair enough. What are you to the right of him on? What's the specific policy? Now, I haven't heard Bernie Sanders say nationalize the railways. I would buy the trains from a private interest, yes, but I would nationalize the railways. I don't think people should have to pay for those services, or at the very least that money can go back to helping other things. There's no point for that. Just go purely into the hands of a 1%. Not to mention, I don't want them having their access on those type of services. Nevertheless, what are you to the right of him on, Khanna? Let's just keep going. Listen to his answer, though. His answer is fucking fascinating on what he chooses to answer with.
I saw that article in The Intercept. I don't necessarily, that's not how I would characterize it. I would say that I'm a little bit different in certain perspectives. Let me give you one example. In our federal jobs guarantee plan, Bernie's plan is only public sector jobs. I have said that's good, but I have said that we all should have it to private sector jobs. And the reason I've said that is when FDR had the right to a job in the New Deal, he talked about the right to a job in farms, and in industry, and in mines. When you look at Denmark's subsidized employment model, they actually have subsidized employment for the private sector as well. And we've got 126 million private sector jobs in this country, about 23 million government jobs. And I don't think people should be not have any opportunity in the private sector, particularly good union jobs, painters, glazers, electricians. We ought to be subsidizing some of those apprenticeship programs. So there are areas that I'm not, obviously no person is 100% aligned. But when it comes to his core principles of Medicare for all, when it comes to free public college, when it comes to labor organizing and the role of unions, getting corporate money and PAC money out of politics, I have supported and advocated for a lot of those policies.
I find that a fascinating answer. So, what policy are you to the right of him on? And he said, I wouldn't characterize it as that. I characterize it as a different approach. Bernie Sanders would like those to be public sector jobs. He would like them to be private sector jobs. And when I hear that, I think you're going to give private sector public money in a federal jobs program. Now, Ro Khanna's main thing is technology. I remember this, and the only reason I remember this is because same progressive kind of went after him on this, like lost her shit when he applied or said he was running. Tech sector. Her point was you have a ton, like a massive amount of money coming from a very specific sector. And would getting money from a sector like that, even if it's not necessarily from a specific PAC, act almost by de facto as a PAC. Now, I would imagine Ro Khanna would say, look, you got to get paid somewhere. He even says it this way, everybody takes their money. It's who you take the money from. Which, again, is right. It's almost like perspective. There's no objective perspective per se. I mean, ultimately, you have all these perspectives swimming in a sea of perspectives. It boils down to how it lines up with reality. Is it possible that part of the reason this private sector thing is because, let's be honest, some of those apprenticeships, a lot of those apprenticeships will probably go towards programmers, engineers, tech jobs, tech education services, things that would do his constituency well. Yes, it may do the entire thing well, but I gotta be honest, I don't know the full scope of what he's talking about. Which is the first thing that leapt out at me when he said it. You're giving private or public money to private sector. Again. But, and that's kind of besides the point. A federal job's guarantee. Look, he's right on the issues. I think he's right on the issues. And at this particular point, I don't know all the intricacies of this jobs program. So, I'm just saying. I like the fact that Ro Khanna was responsive. I like it. I gotta be honest. I like it a lot. And I strongly suspect that when you have a billionaire class, that the way the politicians are obsequious to that class may be the way that Ro Khanna is being reactive to us. That is so fucking weird to me. But at the same token, is that not what you want? Is that not what you want? Let's see. The question becomes, did his dual endorsement lend credibility to Joe Crowley's progressive claims and give him enough of a bump to win? Balthazar 228. That was part of my issue with him giving him the endorsement, because it makes it look like this guy's also a lefty. I mean, even making the argument that, hey, Joe Crowley signed up to my jobs program. Joe Crowley signed up to your jobs program because you, for the most part, was running against Republicans were in office, and it's most likely you weren't going to get a chance to do anything about it. I would suspect, just like, the public option, the moment they get in office, push it away and move on. Push it away and move on. Pivot. They'll pivot. Balthazar 228. Ro has always been a pragmatist. He's willing to support those he agrees with, but also doesn't want to piss off those who could help him. It's better that Pelosi endorsement of Lipinski, but still rough. Now, I agree with you. I mean, he's a politician. Like, I look, what I like in this answer, the thing that leapt out at me in this answer more than anything else was, he's a person. He acted like a person would. Oh God, there's a lot of people who are angry at me. I need these people for their support and their vote, and this is to some degree my base. And yet I have to deal with the Democratic Party. The interesting part here, and maybe I'll run this one afterwards. Dore starts to get, I don't want to call it hostile, but really, and the tone of the interview changes. Like, it's, why do you believe that the Democratic Party is going to do anything different? So beforehand, it's, I want to rehabilitate him. Great. And then it's, why do you think the Democratic Party is going to do anything different? At that point, it just goes after him. But it's a fascinating conversation after this, because, yeah, it's a tonal change. It's so weird. Dore is asking questions about, why do you think the party is going to make any difference? And Ro Khanna is trying to make this argument that, well, the party has changed. party hasn't changed. The party is purely just an opposition. The opposition can be as lefty as it wants when it's running up against a Republican, fucking maniacs. The question is, what do you do when you get the actual power to do something? And we know what they do. Nothing. Anna Maxa, have you considered turning your audio input into a podcast? Many people have less screen time, and more time to listen. I use Podbean app. That might not be a bad idea. Some people said it. I wasn't sure if anybody would be interested, if I'm being honest. But yeah, maybe. Anna Maxa, yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah, come on down. Watch Bernie's brilliant takedown of Trump and establishment legal foreign policy right now. HOE Khanna was for the TPP and against it once caught. Rob, what is this? Watch Bernie's brilliant takedown of Trump and establishment's illegal foreign policy. Did you see his speech on, he did a speech on, what was it, the middle class or something. He has been burning it up in Congress with those speeches. It was amazing. I was sitting there like, this is the Sanders that people voted for. Ho Khanna was for the TPP against it once. Oh, you're trying to say, okay, you're joking him. You're joking his name. Ro Khanna saying Ho Khanna. That's funny. That's funny. I suspect that if he was for the TPP, look, this is where you get to the thing of your backers. Who are your backers? Who are the people who, like he says, everybody's putting money in your pocket. The question is who's putting it in yours. Would he be responsive to pressure on something like that also? I guess that's the question, right? That's the question. So, Mrs. Tree, Jamal Thomas, thank you for having the conversation. You're very important. Thank you, Mrs. Tree. Somebody says Jimmy was lenient. I think Jimmy was a little lenient with Roe. Steve Thomas. I don't know, man. Somebody said don't let him off the hook, and it's like I wasn't letting him off the hook. It's you must understand how we look at this. My feeling is I am beyond this thing of this person is bending a particular way because this person needs to bend a particular way, and you just need to be understanding about it, and we need to just have radical incrementalism and accept. I am done with that. I am ready to leave it be, because I don't think anything changes just by continuously feeding energy into a system that doesn't necessarily work. And definitely nothing changes if you continually support them. It's like this is an argument of putting Hillary in office and pushing her. It's laughable. It's utterly laughable. I respect the hell out of him coming up saying, hey, look, it was a fuck up. It was an accident. In the future, I would pay attention to the people who I endorse, and I would pay more attention to it. My bad. I can respect that. I can totally respect that. And if we're being fair, Jimmy likes Roe. Jimmy has had Ro Khanna on the show multiple times. And so, again, sometimes it's who's in the room. If you have a prior relationship with the person says something crazy, you bring them on your show to have a conversation. You have the capacity to actually have a conversation. It's who's in the room, if that makes sense. Yeah. Ultimately, Roe's endorsement would have been fine in a vacuum, but the GOP having 52 state leg with Democrats being so toxic, it brings more scrutiny and furthers ultimately doomed party. That belt is already, I agree. But I think it also boils down to he just assumed that it would be a nothing campaign. Like, what is the perspective of these campaigns from people who are in Congress and who've been in Congress for 31 years? What is that perspective? And is that perspective, meaning if you know that, if you've worked with Crowley, pretend for the moment that you're not paying attention to politics in New York. You're a California representative. You're paying attention to politics in California. You're in the room with Crowley because you guys want to smoke some dope. And you're like, you know what? The guy helped me with a pot bill. He's not a bad guy. I like him. He's not a bad guy at all. He rolls up doobies. I like him. And he asked for your endorsement. You said, okay. Him, Crowley, being in party for like 31 years, understands that this endorsement is going to be used to try to curry favor with the left. I'm a progressive. I'm Crowley. And see, look at me. Ro. Ro's standing right here with me. Say hi, Ro. Hi. See, Ro says I'm a progressive. You can understand that that's somewhat problematic when lefties have been beat down, shamed, embarrassed, told they were sore losers, kicked, called the bitter enders. That at a certain point, people who have had enough and who are sick of it are less tolerant of BS like that. And those people bitch and moan and hollered and yelled, and apparently he listened. So, good on him. Jimmy gets seduced by politicians' words at first, forgetting that the DNC and RNC don't care about the people and run the show. Yes, but here's the thing. I mean, Jimmy is not necessarily being seduced in this case. Ro, that's been his policies. I mean, what he's telling you about have been the things that he's been pushing for, including less war. It's funny, one of my subscribers, patrons actually, she said, make sure you tell them that Ro Khanna has been less war. And it's like, I've said that on multiple occasions. My issue was never with Ro's policies. My issue was with who he was endorsing. And fact is, I don't necessarily want him to be used as this football in order to try to show off the skills, in this case, of some kind of corporate hack. But he was responsive. I give him credit. I give that. You have no idea how much credit I give that. And it's unfamiliar to me. Me wanting to be a dick about this is somewhat disarmed by the unfamiliarity of what's taking place. I assume scorched earth politics. And the idea that somebody comes back and says, hey guys, you're right. I shouldn't have did that. My bad. In the future, I'm not just going to randomly endorse people. That's shocking to me. I don't know how to deal with that. I'm stunned by that. So good on him. Please talk about proportional representation. It fundamentally impacts everything that we care about and means third parties would have a chance to grow and even win. I'm not sure. No. Oh, you mean like Parliament? Like they have in like let's say Greens get 4% of the population, in which case 4% of the electorate becomes Greens if they were in some kind of political body. Is that what you mean? JT Byrne is beautifully bright. That's hilarious. Let's see. Eventually, you have to ask, would risk Cortez or simply pay off as they help you every time and can't be bought out of those assistant times? Wait a minute, you lost me on this one. Eventually, you have to ask, would risking Cortez or similar pay off as they'd help you every time and can't be bought out by the assistant times? You said she can't be bought off. I don't understand. I don't understand what you're asking. What you're saying. Or similar payoff as they help you every time and can't be bought out of those assistant times. I don't understand what Belters are. Write it one more time. Not as a thing. Just write it as regular. Human flesh tastes like pork. That's not. What could Ro have done but what he did? I think proportional representation is called ranked choice. Oh, you mean ranked choice voting? I think you mean ranked choice. Where was Ro when WikiLeaks? I read every single page. I vaguely remember the mention of donors in the area of fundraising. It's not ranked choice voting. Okay. I think what you're talking about is something like Parliament, where you have X number of people in a particular population, in which case you get X number of people to represent that particular party. Let me know if I'm right about that. I could be wrong. is crucially important, which impacts every issue we care about. It's not a separable thing. It's not a minor thing. It's fundamental to our success as progressives and meaningful change. Ranked choice within proportional representation is a good thing, but not on its own. I mean, the ranked choice voting thing is, at least I think it's a good idea. I would have to have an argument. Data Laterra, Jamal, you're right. Okay. I don't know how you get that here in the States. Like, it's difficult enough for me to try to get somebody to even shake from their regular voting system itself, to try to explain to them, look, ranked choice voting is a better system because it gives you more options in the way that you go about your affairs. It puts more power into your hands as opposed to the politicians themselves that can play one against the other in the ballot box. People get stuck in their ways. Like in history, it has this weird way of sticking to itself. And I did this yesterday, and I did it the day before, and my mom did it the day before, and my grandma did it the day before. And so now I'm still doing it with just minor tweaks and modifications from the time going all the way back to then. It's hard to get people to break those changes, but I feel you. The same progressive was right about Roe. I don't know. She was pretty strong. I think she was pretty strong. I'll say it that way. I'm not gonna go after her, but I think she was a little strong on Roe. But, and not to mention, that was when he first came out, meaning there was no way to know. But again, he has, look, the things that he say he represents, he has. And not just the things that he say he represents, he has. He literally, within the course of a day, was responsive to a certain section of the community that, for all intents and purposes, under every normal circumstance, gets ignored. I mean, come on, let's be fair. It feels a lot like JD says the right things because they think it's what you want to hear, not because they believe in them. The invisible, right there. Sometimes when I hear people make arguments and they say, well, I mean, come on, they're trying to pass healthcare. You're not doing it for me. You're not doing it for me. You're doing it because you believe in it. It's a difference in those things. Now, the catch becomes, if you don't believe in it and the person needs to be pushed, well, you can imagine if the person doesn't believe in it, how hard are they going to push for those things? Meaning you end up having to push shit out of them because they apparently don't believe in it. I don't think that's what this was. I think this really was a colleague who I work with, which is true, by the way, asked me for his support. I gave it to him, not thinking anybody was going to care. And people cared, in which case I said, oh shit. And I turned around and withdrew gave my support to the other person. That's what it sounds like to me. That's all it sounds like to me. I could be wrong. Alright, I'm going to end this here because I have a bunch of these that I want to do today, and I don't want to be out too late. Kelly is in, well, she's a friend of the show. I don't know if everybody knows Kelly. But she's in, at the WikiLeaks thing in DC. I am hoping that she's going to be able to get footage so we can kind of see what's taking place there. I know she was having lunch with some of the people who were there. So I'll see if I can get footage for that. So that should be interesting. But I have a bunch of other shows that I want to do today. And my feeling is I'm probably not going to be able to get to all of them. But I'm going to try it nonetheless. So I'm going to take about a 10-minute break. And I will see you guys back in about, 10 minutes. Ish. Might be 15. Thanks, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And, of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys.